The next 48 hours are not ordinary time. They are a sacred window designed for spiritual realignment. God often uses short, specific periods to do deep internal work. When he calls his chosen ones into stillness, he is inviting them into a cleansing process that goes beyond emotions and thoughts. This is a moment to release spiritual residue that has accumulated from stress, disappointment, overthinking, and delayed expectations. Silence creates the environment where this cleansing can take place without resistance. Alignment begins when external noise is removed. Conversations, complaints, and constant reactions can slowly pull the heart out of position without being noticed. During this period of silence, God is gently recalibrating priorities, motives, and perspectives. What once felt urgent begins to lose its intensity. What truly matters rises to the surface. This is how God brings his chosen back into harmony with his will, by quieting everything else. Cleansing is not always dramatic. Often it happens subtly as peace replaces tension and clarity replaces confusion. In silence, the spirit is given room to breathe. God begins to expose thought patterns that no longer serve his purpose. Old fears, negative self-talk, and unresolved frustration surface, not to condemn, but to be released. Silence allows these things to pass without being fueled by words or reactions. Discernment is sharpened in quiet moments. When the chosen are no longer speaking into every situation, they begin to see more clearly. God reveals who to trust, where to invest energy, and what to let go of. The constant need to explain or respond fades, and wisdom takes its place. Decisions become less emotional and more intentional. This clarity is one of the greatest benefits of obedience during this time. God is also restoring spiritual sensitivity. Life's noise can dull the ability to recognize his leading. Silence reawakens that sensitivity. Gentle nudges, inner convictions, and subtle confirmations become easier to notice. The chosen begin to recognize God's voice not as pressure, but as peace. This sensitivity will be crucial for what comes next, because the next season will require precise obedience. This 48-hour pause is a reset. It is God's way of preparing his chosen for movement without confusion. When silence ends, the heart will be lighter, the mind clearer, and the spirit steadier. Alignment, cleansing, and discernment work together to position the chosen exactly where they need to be. What God accomplishes in this quiet season will influence every step that follows, ensuring that the next move is guided, intentional, and in harmony with heaven's direction. Obedience to divine instruction always carries a reward, even when that instruction feels uncomfortable or counterintuitive. Choosing silence when God asks for it is not passive behavior, it is active faith. It is the decision to trust God's process more than personal urgency. When the chosen ones submit to this instruction, something shifts internally before anything changes externally. Peace begins to replace restlessness, and confidence settles where anxiety once lived. Clarity is one of the first fruits of obedience. As the noise fades, thoughts become more organized and focused. Confusion that once felt overwhelming starts to lose its grip. God uses obedience to align the mind with his perspective. Instead of reacting to situations, the chosen begin to understand them. This understanding does not come from analysis or discussion, but from divine insight. What was once blurry becomes clear, and what felt uncertain becomes steady. Peace follows clarity, not a fragile peace that depends on circumstances, but a grounded peace rooted in trust. Obedience quiets the inner struggle between faith and fear. When the chosen obey God's instruction to remain silent, they stop striving to control outcomes. This surrender invites rest into the spirit. Even when situations remain unresolved, there is a deep assurance that God is at work. This peace becomes a source of strength rather than passivity. As obedience continues, confidence in the next move begins to grow. Silence allows God to give direction without competition from outside voices. When the time comes to speak or act, the chosen do so with precision. There is no rush, no hesitation, and no need for explanation. The next step is taken with authority because it is rooted in divine instruction, not emotional impulse. Guidance becomes more evident after obedience. God does not leave his chosen in silence without purpose. He uses that quiet season to prepare them for movement. When the silence lifts, there is an inner knowing, an assurance that the timing is right. Decisions feel lighter because they are no longer burdened by doubt or pressure. The chosen move forward with intentionality, aware of where to go and what to leave behind. This obedience leads to momentum. Instead of scattered energy, there is focused action. Instead of emotional reactions, there is spiritual confidence. What follows the silence is not confusion, but clarity-driven progress. God honors obedience by making the path unmistakable. The chosen ones step into their next season with peace in their hearts, strength in their spirit, and confidence in their direction, knowing that silence prepared them for everything that comes next. Silence carries a unique authority that disrupts unseen opposition. When the chosen ones refrain from speaking, they step out of predictable patterns. The enemy studies reactions, feeds on emotional responses, and anticipates words spoken in frustration or fear. Silence removes that access. It creates confusion where the enemy expected engagement. Without a reaction to manipulate, plans formed against the chosen lose direction and power. Spiritual opposition thrives on exposure. When divine assignments are spoken too freely, they become targets. God understands this, which is why he often instructs his chosen to keep certain things private. Silence acts as a covering. It protects what God is developing before it is fully revealed. Just as seeds grow best underground, divine callings mature best in hidden places. What remains unspoken is shielded from unnecessary interference. When the chosen remain silent, they deny the enemy information. No words means no clues, no emotional leakage, and no openings for manipulation. The enemy cannot twist what they do not hear. This lack of access weakens opposition and strengthens spiritual positioning. Silence becomes a boundary that guards peace, focus, and direction. It prevents spiritual fatigue caused by constant explanation and defense. Silence also protects the purity of God's instruction. Not everyone is equipped to handle holy information. Some will misunderstand it, question it, or project their own limitations onto it. When divine insight is shared prematurely, it can become contaminated by doubt or criticism. Silence preserves clarity. It allows God's voice to remain the primary influence rather than outside opinions. This purity is essential for obedience. that is confident and unwavering, God often tests trust through privacy. Keeping quiet about what he has revealed requires discipline and faith. It means resisting the urge to seek validation or approval from others. Silence declares that God's affirmation is enough. This level of trust strengthens spiritual authority and deepens intimacy with God. The chosen ones learn that they do not need an audience for obedience. As silence continues, discernment increases. The chosen begin to recognize which connections drain them and which align with their purpose. This awareness brings separation without conflict. Silence creates space for God to rearrange relationships and remove distractions without confrontation. What falls away does so naturally without force. By staying silent, the chosen ones protect not only their assignment, but their peace. They move forward with clarity, confidence, and spiritual security. Silence becomes a shield guarding what God is doing until the proper time for revelation arrives. Silence carries a depth of spiritual authority that many underestimate. In a world driven by noise, opinions, and constant reaction, choosing to be quiet becomes a powerful act of faith. Silence is not the absence of strength, it is the presence of trust. When God instructs his chosen ones to be silent, he is inviting them to step out of self-effort and into divine intervention. It is in this quiet posture that God takes the lead and begins to work in ways no human effort could accomplish. Spiritual battles are rarely won by louder voices or sharper arguments. Many conflicts appear natural on the surface, but are rooted in spiritual opposition. When the chosen respond emotionally, they unknowingly engage at the wrong level. Silence withdraws energy from the enemy. It denies them access to your peace and removes their ability to manipulate reactions. By staying quiet, you are refusing to wrestle in the flesh and allowing God to fight in the spirit. Silence also amplifies God's voice. When your mouth is closed, your spirit becomes open. God does not compete with noise. He speaks where there is room to hear. In silence, distractions lose their influence and clarity begins to rise. What once felt confusing starts to settle. Decisions become lighter because they are no longer fueled by anxiety or pressure. The chosen ones learn that God's guidance often comes as a calm certainty rather than dramatic instruction. There is power in silence because it demonstrates confidence in God's sovereignty. You no longer feel the need to prove your intentions, explain your position, or defend your character. God sees what others misunderstand. He hears what has been spoken against you. Silence communicates that you trust him to handle what you cannot control. This trust activates divine favor and protection because God honors those who rest in him rather than striving for validation. When God fights on your behalf, he does so completely. He addresses motives, exposes hidden agendas, and opens doors that no argument could unlock. Silence gives God full access to operate without interference. Words spoken in haste can delay outcomes, but restraint accelerates divine timing. God moves swiftly when his chosen are aligned with his will, and silence is often the alignment he requires. Silence also strengthens inner authority. Instead of being driven by reactions, you become led by discernment. Emotional stability grows, peace settles, and spiritual confidence deepens. You begin to recognize that not every battle deserves a response, and not every voice deserves attention. This maturity is evidence of spiritual growth. Silence becomes your shield, your boundary, and your weapon, not because you are weak, but because God is strong enough to speak and act for you. There are moments in a believer's life when God does not call for action, explanation, or even vocal prayer, but for complete stillness. This call to silence is not a sign of rejection or delay. It is evidence of divine selection. When God asks the chosen to be quiet, it is because something sacred is taking place beyond what human eyes can see. Silence becomes the space where God rearranges, realigns, and resets what words have complicated. Many people assume that progress always requires speaking, but in spiritual matters, restraint can be more powerful than expression. This season of silence is strategic. God knows that every word spoken carries weight in the spirit realm. Some words invite peace, while others unintentionally invite warfare. By instructing his chosen ones to remain silent, God is closing doors that unnecessary speech could reopen. He is preventing reactions that would pull his people into emotional battles. Instead of spiritual victory, silence keeps the focus on heaven's agenda rather than human opinion or pressure. Being silent also protects the heart. When emotions are stirred, words often follow quickly, and once spoken, they cannot be taken back. God understands how easily frustration, disappointment, or misunderstanding can shape what comes out of the mouth. By calling for silence, he is guarding his people from speaking out of pain instead of purpose. This restraint allows healing to begin internally while God works externally. Silence is also a sign of trust. It says, without words, that God is capable of handling what concerns you. It declares faith in God's timing, justice, and wisdom. When chosen ones obey this instruction, they are surrendering control and allowing God to take full authority over the situation. Silence becomes a form of worship, a quiet declaration that God is enough even when answers are not immediate. In this divine pause, God begins to refine spiritual sensitivity. Without constant speaking, the spirit becomes more attentive. Thoughts slow down, distractions lose their grip, and clarity begins to rise. God often reveals his direction not through noise, but through gentle conviction and inner peace. Silence sharpens discernment, allowing his people to recognize what aligns with his will and what does not. This instruction is not meant to isolate or suppress, but to prepare. God often silences his chosen ones before elevating them. Before promotion, there is privacy. Before exposure, there is separation. Silence becomes the womb where purpose matures. What God is forming in this quiet season will soon require strength, wisdom, and precision. By obeying the call to silence, the chosen ones are positioning themselves for what comes next, demonstrating obedience, humility, and readiness for divine movement. There is a hidden danger in responding too quickly, especially when emotions are stirred and pressure is high. Many delays in life are not caused by opposition alone, but by premature reactions. God understands that words spoken in the heat of the moment can shift spiritual outcomes. That is why he often instructs his chosen ones to pause, to resist the urge to explain, defend, or justify themselves. Silence becomes a safeguard, preventing unnecessary detours that could slow down what God has already ordained. When accusations arise or misunderstandings surface, the natural instinct is to respond immediately. The heart wants to be understood and pride wants to be cleared. But God knows that not every situation requires a response. Some explanations are wasted on ears that are not willing to hear. By staying silent, the chosen ones avoid being pulled into arguments that drain spiritual energy and shift focus away from God's purpose. Silence keeps the heart anchored and the spirit protected. Self-defense can easily turn into self-interference. When you rush to defend your character, you may unknowingly take God's place as your vindicator. God is fully capable of revealing truth in His time. Silence allows Him to expose what needs to be seen without your involvement. What you don't explain, God clarifies. What you don't fight, God resolves. This divine exchange only works when the chosen ones resist the urge to take matters into their own hands. Premature words can also create unnecessary emotional entanglements. One response leads to another, and soon peace is replaced by tension. God wants His chosen to remain emotionally free, not trapped in cycles of reaction. Silence breaks that cycle. It ends conversations that were never meant to continue and closes doors that words would have kept open. In this way, silence becomes a form of wisdom, guiding the chosen away from distractions and toward divine focus. God's plans operate on divine timing, not emotional urgency. When chosen ones speak too soon, they may reveal what God intended to keep hidden for a season. Not everyone is meant to know what God is doing in your life. Some people will misuse that information, misunderstand it, or oppose it. Silence protects the process. It ensures that what God is building grows without interference, pressure, or sabotage. By choosing silence, the chosen ones demonstrate maturity and trust. They acknowledge that God's plans do not need human approval or defense. Silence preserves spiritual momentum, keeping God's work moving forward without interruption. Instead of delaying destiny, restraint accelerates it. What seems like inaction is actually obedience, and that obedience keeps the path clear for God to fulfill every promise in His perfect time.